So we are actually 1 minute away. So a quick introduction to all of you, and then we will straight away start with the discussions. And just to give you quick introduction, Smita Maheshwar Peri is the founder of Career 360, and Professor Parsu, I don't think any introduction is required. He's joining us from Miami. He is the emeritus professor of marketing there. He's the guru of service quality, and he is also the pro vice chancellor of Vijay Bhumi University, which is the first, greenfield university in the state of Maharashtra, so to say. And Smita is the president of, NHRD in the Bangalore chapter. She also heads the HR for AstraZeneca. That's how you pronounce it. I am right?
That's right.
And she's also from Bangalore, St. Xavier's Bangalore, and TIS. Okay. Sorry, I just slip of tongue, from Bombay, basically. Okay. So she's from TIS, Bombay, and then, of course, she has been in the industry for a very, very long time, Oracle, etc., etc. So what I will tell the what I will request each one of you to actually introduce, okay, and then we can get into the discussion.
So are we live now?
Okay, so we go live, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
So very good evening and welcome to this very interesting discussion on liberating the MBA. I am Atish Chattopadhyay, and I'm the director of IFIM Business School, and also the vice chancellor of the first liberal professional university of the country, which is Vijay Bhumi University. I have lived in Bombay and Delhi both. Okay, so and because my colleagues who have joined here, Maheshwar Peri is joining from Delhi. I have served at IMD Ghaziabad as the director, and I have Smita Saha, who is joining from right now in Bangalore, but I think she has been in Bombay for a very, very long time, and so was my case. I've been with SPGMR for a very long time before moving to Delhi and then to Bangalore. And it is my pleasure to welcome also Professor Parsu, who is joining us from Miami. He is the emeritus professor of marketing, and he's the guru of service quality. He is also the pro-chancellor academic of Vijay Bhumi University. So welcome to each one of you, and I would like to welcome the audience to this particular discussion. Before we get started, I would request each one of you to give a short introduction of yourself and how do you look at this whole issue of MBA education, maybe in a short 2 to 3 minutes time, starting with Smita maybe.
I think she froze.
Yeah, it seems so.
I can't hear anything. I don't know if it's my problem.
We can all hear you.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
We can hear you. So what we do is, as you fix this, let me start with Maheshwar Peri.
Hi, my name is Maheshwar Peri.
So Mahesh, would you like to give you a small introduction first?
Yeah, okay. So by qualification, I'm a CA, ICW, ACA, so I'm in the sense a financial person. And I was initially an investment banker for about 4 years. Then joined the Outlook Group to launch Outlook in 1995, along with a lot of very, very good journalists and publishers. And I've been there till 2012. And 2012, I moved and started this entrepreneurial journey. I started this journey actually in 2009, but moved in full-time in 2012. So, and launched Career 360. The idea behind Career 360 is to help every student decide, their career path based on objective decisions. So, helping students make, more informed career choices is what our objective is. We stick with that in terms of collating data from multiple sources. Like we are a company which files about 10,000 right to information reports to force institutions to share data with us. We're typically after everyone where the data is needed. So that's what I am. I think I'll move on to the next one, Atish. Or you want me to talk about
Yes.
this subject?
A little
also?
bit about how you view the MBA education or the management education, so to say.
Yeah, I think I'll stick to the topic at this point in time.
Yes.
See, the way we've been going around, admitting students into the MBA schools itself proves that liberal education is very important. We no longer believe only in schools, right? You don't want a class which is full of engineers who wanted to who cracked a cat because they understand maths and logic and reasoning and so on and so forth, and getting onto your place and exactly discussing and thinking exactly alike, right? So the fact that you are trying to be creating a diverse classroom by including people from the liberal arts sciences, even though they have a lesser score, is itself a proof that the B schools are starved of.
Yes, I can't hear anything. I can hear you on the phone. Yes, I can hear you on the phone, but I can't hear anything on the thing. I've closed my camera, but I'm still not able to do anything. So shall I move to myself?
Smita, we can hear you very clearly.
Okay, I think I can be heard by them, but I can't hear. Oh, wonderful. One second. Hi, Atish, can you hear me?
Yeah, very clearly. All of us can hear you.
All right, wonderful. I think they can hear me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So my perception is that,
I was lost in the middle for a few minutes. I couldn't hear a thing, so I was a bit concerned.
Yeah, you can catch up and turn on the video.
I can't turn on the video because the video I think is taking up too much of bandwidth or something, because it wasn't good.
Okay.
Let me try again and see if it works. Can you continue me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We continue.
No.
We can see you and we can hear you.
Okay.
So from my perspective, I think the B schools have always been, at least
I
for the
think
last.
it is better for me to switch the camera off. At least I can hear better.
Fair enough.
So my perception is that B schools have been striving hard to create a diversity in the classroom by getting people with liberal arts education be a part of the class. The examination papers that you have are biased against liberal arts people, but you still want liberal arts people, and which is where you lower the score and those kind of things. There is no way that even a good B school with no diversity will be able to succeed. You can't create a set of people who think alike, work alike, believe alike, and then talk of creating leaders unless you're only creating managers. So from that perspective, I do think that while we are ensuring that through the admission process we create a better diversity, it's important that the curriculum itself has better diversity. Otherwise, we are stuck in the same rot. So from my perspective, it took a long time coming. I'm happy that we're discussing this, and B school education would not move ahead unless you include things which are to do with liberal arts. Otherwise, we are dead over a period of time.
Fantastic points. I think very important point that the schools are moving away from the scores which are essentially based on quantitative aptitude, and the whole issue of admission to look at diversity and also curriculum to bring in that diversity. That's what I think was very important points made. Sir, a quick introduction of yours, though you need no introduction, but still for the audience sake, and then sharing your thoughts on the topic of discussion today.
Yeah, very good evening to all of you. It's my pleasure to be part of this panel. I got my initial education in India. I went to IIT Madras and got my mechanical engineering degree in 1970, and then I went to IMA to get my MBA 72, and then immediately after that I went to the US to get my PhD at Indiana University, which I did in 1975 in the area of marketing. And then in the last 45 years, I've been teaching and doing research at 3 different institutions in the US, most recently at the University of Miami, where I retired last year and became emeritus professor of marketing. Fortunately, in this new chapter in my own career, I have had the good fortune of being affiliated with Atish at 3 different institutions. I first met him at MICA, I think maybe about 5 years ago, and then we had started discussing, research and teaching, and the initial ideas about MBA and business education and so forth kind of took root during that initial discussion. And then we hooked up again at IMT Ghaziabad, where Atish was. I made several visits to IMT Ghaziabad. And then after Atish moved to IFIM about a couple of years ago, I've been much more intensely connected with IFIM and now Vijay Bhumi University that Atish mentioned as pro-chancellor. From my perspective, I definitely think the MBA of old is dead, including the MBA that I went through at IIMA when I was a student there. And Mahesh made a very interesting point that with which I totally agree. You cannot afford to have a class that consists of like-minded people, which unfortunately was the case at IMA in those days. Most of us were engineers. I think about 75% or more had some engineering, science type of background. Very few from the liberal arts area. But I think that model is not going to work for a variety of reasons, some of which I'm sure we will get into. But I think there is pressure coming both from students in terms of what value is MBA adding to me as a person, and also from the industry, questioning, do we really need the traditional MBA qualified students? So the pressure coming both from the demand side and the supply side, so to speak. I think the liberal arts oriented type of MBA program is the way to go. There are a number of reasons for it. Again, we will get into those a little bit later in the discussion. But so I'm really excited about this topic, and I think it's extremely important to completely rethink the MBA and see how rediscover, as the title of the or liberate and rediscover the MBA, as the title of our panel suggests. So I will stop here for now. Can't hear you, Atish.
We can hear you clearly.
Yeah.
And if you can just give a short introduction of yours, and then from the industry perspective, how do you look at the MBA curriculum and the way the MBA education needs to probably unfold?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Smita, and I'm so honored to be here with all of you. I'm aware that NHRD has a long relationship with IFIM, and I really look forward to more meaningful discussions. When Atish, when you talked about what is happening in MBA and how do we look at it, and I must tell you a couple of things. When you look at what is it that we're looking for from people today, we are really looking at people who have the agility to learn and to move forward and learn more things. Because at the end of the day, we are no better at predicting the future today than we were in the past. All we can talk about is that things are getting more and more complex. That's probably the only thing we know for sure. Things are getting more complex, and therefore, do we have people who can deal with that complexity? Also, the values that we hold dear are changing a lot. When I look at my organization, in addition to all of the usual values and behaviors that an organization has, something that we really look forward to in people is whether they have a mindset which is inclusive, whether they have an ability to think in a sustainable way, and whether their solutions are longer term and more sustainable versus are they talking about a here and now, which means we're talking about a lot more broader skills. We also talk a lot around digital, and the fact is that digital is a huge disruptor, and do people even understand what it means? Is it the same as doing the same thing physically and doing the same thing digitally, or does digital actually change something? I also look at it from the perspective that, when we hire people, while we do look for functional experts, we also look at people who are willing to build a more holistic career and look broader. Because honestly, the job roles as we see them today may not exist in a few years and have been continually changing. If you look at the industry also, with different models changing, the roles themselves are changing. We are a lot more, subject matter expertise is very highly valued because it is so difficult to get that. And then when you look at broad general leadership capabilities, that's again very highly valued because that is again very rare. So it's very funny, we would like people with broadness of capabilities, but we also want people who are deep in certain areas for sure. So that sort of becomes their calling card. They're good at something, really good at something, and understand the basic ecosystem to deliver with. So it is a little bit of a mix, it's a bit about being having the breadth and having the depth. So that is actually quite peculiar in what the industry is looking at specifically today. And in that context, if you look at, for example, if you look at MBAs, and I'll tell you something really funny, we hire a lot of doctors in where I come from today, and doctors are again very, very specialized, and doctors don't necessarily do MBAs. And then we continually think about how do we teach them leadership. May not be in the context of MBA, but just the ability to look broad, because they are by trade very narrow and very focused and very specialized. And on the reverse, when we hire MBAs, we find that they are very superficial and looking only at the broad picture, talking broad brush, but they're not getting into the depth of anything. So we have both. And as an industry, we are constantly trying to hire both types of people and fill the gap, whichever is the gap for that community of people.
Fantastic points, Smita. And we did a survey with NHRDN, which you are aware of probably. And we identified the 10 needs. But one of the things that came out, and exactly what you said, that a broad holistic understanding with a deep specialized knowledge of a functional area, and what
Yes.
we termed as the T-shaped professionals of the future. I think that was something which came out very clearly. And T-shaped professionals in terms of being broader, in terms of a very holistic approach, understanding multidisciplinary aspects, and then a deep knowledge and skill of a functional area. Now, Mahesh, I would like to ask you, when we talk about this liberal framework being integrated with the MBA curriculum, and you are seeing institutions across, what are institutions doing, and how do you see that happening or unfolding, in the Indian context?
Actually, if you look at the in the last few years, Atish, you've seen an expansion of the liberal arts universities, which we never thought. We're always a STEM nation in a sense, right? Much of the institution that we have would be either a STEM nation or a formal degree program, programs. But you look at the Kriya University, the Flame University, the Ashoka University, and Jindal University, and now Vijayabhumi. There seems to be a definite movement towards creating, institutions which give the choice to the student and are inclusive of liberal arts. It can be philosophy or history or literature or whatever you call it. But there seems to be a definite movement towards inclusion of a few liberal arts programs along with what was also essential earlier, which is finance, marketing, technology, and so on and so forth. Now, the thing is, for me, there is no way we can solve the problems of the nation or the world or the society by only thinking from the left side of the brain, because the problems are not an Excel sheet. The solutions are not linear. Now, if you start getting into linear thinking, it is impossible for us to solve any problem, because there are multifaceted issues that come up with while we are trying to solve the problem. Whereas as a finance person, I only know that it's easy for someone to come and make a presentation where they say they're going to reduce the expenses by 10% and increase the income by 10%, and the company would be profitable 40% EBITDA or something like that, right? It's easier to say that. Now, what happens when you reduce 10% cost, or how do you increase 10% revenues, is where the non-linear thinking comes in, where a liberal arts kind of a person would be able to add more value to the whole thing. So for me, across the board, in many universities, you're actually seeing a very conscious effort by universities to add certain subjects which were not there, say 10 years back or 7 years back or 5 years back also. That's a welcome sign, because as I keep saying, that it is not just, earlier we were trying to create a proxy by ensuring that the diversity in the classroom is maintained by us getting students who are liberal arts students who did not get a good score on an examination. So obviously the examination is flawed to the extent of not judging them well, and then making that diversity talk. But it was not at a curriculum level. It was always at an admission level that you were trying to do that. With liberal arts universities really growing in the country, and with many of the existing universities also adding some of the course curriculum which is to do with liberal arts, even in MBA, I think we are moving in the right direction. And I see that as a conscious effort in every university that I see.
Fantastic points. Sir, you have been in academic for such a long time, including you have seen the evolution of curriculums. I think what Maheshwar Peri said just now is to move from admission level to curriculum level. How do we integrate the liberal framework or liberal arts with the MBA curriculum? Sir, you are on mute, sir.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've got a variety of thoughts on this, but I'll try and keep it more streamlined. At the admissions level, as Mahesh pointed out, I think more universities, even in the US, are putting at least less. They're not moving away from testing the STEM types of subjects, but they are putting less weightage on it and more on what is the individual inherent capabilities of the person that goes broader than just the STEM type abilities. So that's one thing. Now, the curriculum itself, one disadvantage I would say even most of the established universities have is that they are very, very rigid in their structures. They've got, for example, there is functional siloing within institutions. There's marketing, there's finance, there's accounting, and there are big name people in these different departments that are doing the research, and they've really earned their stripes, so to speak, well-known professors. And there is very little interaction even among faculty. One of the issues that I have is that for truly liberating the MBA, you also need to sort of liberate the faculty. In fact, I have this phrase which I say that to really implement properly curriculum 4.0 to address the needs of industry 4.0, you also need to have faculty 4.0. So Atish mentioned earlier the T-shaped individuals are going to become increasingly important. In other words, you kind of try to train students that have in-depth knowledge that Smitha is looking for, also in certain specializations. At the same time, they have the very broad, top bar, so to speak, that will sort of help them get out of their comfort zone, so to speak, and be able to connect the dots in very creative ways and curious ways. So I think, likewise, I would also say that faculty also need to be sort of rediscovered and retrained to kind of step out of their comfort zone of their narrow-minded thinking and move across. So having said that, let me come back to Mahesh. You mentioned a number of very good universities in India that are taking this new approach. Virtually all of them are fairly new. So the IIMs, IMA, IMC, which have their name on their own, are probably would be much slower to react and proactively sort of design things to kind of fit this new liberated MBA type of format. Younger institutions, the new kids on the block, so to speak, would be much more agile. And also there is another reason for it, and this is that an organization that kind of organically grows that way would be would find it a lot easier to implement this type of a curriculum, liberal arts oriented professional MBA curriculum, than an organization that's already earned its stripes and well established, and you try to kind of superimpose something on their pre-existing structures. I know they are moving in that direction. Most universities are trying to move in that direction, but I think there will be definitely a differentiation between even the brand names like Harvard and so forth. I mean, they can survive regardless of whether they change the MBA or not, just because of the brand equity is there. But the other sort of equally or similarly well-established institutions that may not have the Harvard brand name or the Stanford brand name, they will have a tougher time, I think, making this transition. That's where I think new universities have a first mover advantage, so to speak, in this regard. Atesh, you're on mute.
So, Smita, universities that Mahesh mentioned are already doing it, and there is a effort in that direction. And you talked about, getting those kind of, people who are more broad and inclusive, okay, and also understands the whole issue of sustainability. Now, you also said that you are recruiting doctors and then you want to broaden their skill sets. How do you achieve that, and what is it that can be done in the curriculum to make that happen?
Earlier, Dr. Mahesh and Dr. Parshuraman were talking that, we tend to be a lot more siloed in the way we have studied. Let me give you my own example. I have done a bachelor's with genetics from St. Xavier's College, Bombay. Okay, and even when we were studying, I remember we used to have, while this is a hardcore science subject, we used to have one arts subject compulsory for us. And it was, political science or sociology or whatever. So we had to have one subject. But that was almost as if it was sort of thrust upon us. All of us were looking at a completely different field, but we never understood why is it that we were being pushed into taking a program in sociology or psychology or something. But today, when I see, what is happening, I genuinely realize that was probably way ahead of its time, but it certainly was small baby steps. But what we need is much more broad. Today, when we hire, say, doctors, we hire them from the best medical schools in India, right? And over there, they are not studying any of these humanities subjects. Let's be honest, nothing. But when they come into the industry, or even for that matter, if they're practicing as a specialist, when they're actually looking at a patient, are they not looking at that person as a person and actually dealing with the person with the entire patient ecosystem? It's not just a person, right? It's the patient's family, the caregivers, how the patient is actually reacting to all of the support that we are offering. It is not just a disease that you treat. You have to look at it in a much broader way. And this I'm talking from a doctor's perspective. Now, if you were to move that to say IT professionals perspective, again, when you build a solution, say for example, you're building a solution for finance, it's not the process that you're working with. It's the people who are going to run the process who are actually the customers that you're going to deal with. So your customer at the end of the day is always a person. So when you're specializing yourself very deeply into a technology or a technical stream, it's important to bear in mind that you're dealing with a very complex person. And that automatically means you need to have this broader understanding of how you deal with them. From an organization's perspective, in my current org where I hire doctors, in my previous org when I was in Oracle, I used to hire engineers. It's the same. We bring in the brightest and the smartest people with the focus on their technical stream, whatever that is. And then we are trying to teach them leadership, people skills, problem solving, getting along with each other, collaboration, sustainability, all of that. And I can tell you, it's a lot of organizations have invested in these leadership development programs. Some of them even call it, you have these tiered programs where they run it for about a year or 2 years. And you graduate from that program before you can take up another role, etc. These are all different mechanisms that the industry has found to bridge those gaps, because we don't find that in the curriculum, or we don't find it exactly as we need it. So we pick one and train for the other. That's really become the model in most organizations that I have worked in.
Understood. And that's something which is a food for thought, sir, for those who are developing curriculum in MBA institutions. My question to Mahesh, now you talked about the universities in India who are adopting liberal framework, and Professor Parsu mentioned about some of the older, reputed institutions who will be finding it challenging. Now, my question is: do you think that in India, the challenge is we have these management institutions which are essentially standalone institutions. So there are single discipline institutions. Now, can single discipline institutions deliver this kind of a curriculum? How will the transition happen? Will the transition happen? What are the challenges that you see?
So, just to add to what Professor Parsu said earlier, sir, IIM Kozhikode has already launched a program. It is, postgraduate program in liberal studies and management. So it's a good, and that program is going to start this year in the month of June. It was supposed to start in the month of June. So the established standalone institutions have already started the journey of creating a program which includes liberal arts. And I understand what you're saying, because you're dealing with only a set of learnings in terms of faculty and teaching and those kind of things. But I don't think it is too difficult or very difficult to add this part of the thing. So I don't see it as a challenge. And more than that, let's face it, Atish, if the need is to add liberal arts, we bloody well find a way of getting in. It's not a choice that is left to us. It is how we do it and how fast we do it is the only question that we have to deal with. We cannot be dealing with is it possible and how feasible is it. That for me is not a question at all, because otherwise MBA education over a period of time will die a slow death. Because you look at the kind of issues that we're dealing with. We're not just dealing with numbers alone. Right now the debate that I was having with Professor Parsu earlier, the lives versus livelihood debate, when we had to decide of whether we should go for a lockdown or not. Now the lives part of it would be another number, the livelihood part of it would be another set of numbers, but there is a human cost to the whole thing. And so, and these decisions are also there in everything else that we do. Like, I run an edtech company. Now, education is supposed to be a noble profession. Now, do we treat it as a noble profession which is devoid of numbers? Or do we deal with the entire profession of also creating impact, also doing it the right way and still having the numbers? Because if you don't have the numbers, you don't survive. But if you only do numbers, you can be a street thug out there. So I think that increasingly impact, social impact, societal impact would be very important in the working and survival of companies from here on. People would measure them of how a company behaves in the society while also dealing with the numbers it produces, which is the profits and the growth and those kind of things. So for me, the B schools don't
Quick
have a
question, sir,
choice
for you.
Sorry?
And very important point that Mahesh raised. How do we do it and how fast do we do it? Sir, the question is, how do we do it? Because you have led so many curriculum development exercises.
Yeah, again, I totally agree with Mahesh. I think if there is a need to introduce liberal arts, we will find a way. The point I would start my response by saying that I totally agree with that. But to reiterate a point that I made earlier, I think the institutions that are in their nascent stages of being formed will have a much easier time doing it. So I think that's where the Vijay Bhumis of the world will have a leg up. But then they need to leverage that. The liberal arts, the top part of the T, is something that might be there, but then to develop the specializations that Smita is talking about, they may not be. Vijay Bhumi University may not be up there yet. For example, if you take something like data science, but they may be getting there. So this is where I think another notion I'd like to overlay on this is that we need to think about institutions, both the young growing institutions and the well-established institutions, have to think of operating in a consortium type of basis where there are interlinkages across institutions. IFIM, for example, I know that in developing their new curriculum, they are in fact partnering with other institutions, some in India, but many in abroad, both in Europe and in the US, to look for the depth type of training. And then the India focus will be more on the liberalizing the curriculum. And by the same token, the institutions that are already siloed and well established, so to speak, they should take advantage, I think, of these younger institutions and collaborate with them through some ecosystem type of arrangement where there is free flowing of ideas across institutions. So I think in general, institutions themselves should become broader in their thinking, step out of their comfort zones, so to speak. So that's my view. I think institutions that succeed, whether they're young or established, in kind of thinking out of the box, so to speak. How do we, no longer can we think about, institutions competing against each other. I mean, I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think a more productive way, I mean, they will be competing, but more productive way would be how can we coexist and grow together, and at the same time meet the fast-changing needs of the industry that Smita very eloquently summarized earlier.
Smita, you talked about skills like problem solving, the whole issue of collaboration, interpersonal, relationships, social, impact, also inclusiveness. Now, what is it that the liberal art curriculum delivers as an outcome? When we are talking about liberal arts, what is it that it delivers as an outcome?
Thanks for that. I think, what we are really looking for are people who have a broader set of experiences and understanding of the world than just a very siloed view. So it has to be broader. So I think it's not so much as the individual capabilities and skills, which there are many specializations right there in liberal arts itself. But I think the important thing is, how does it train your mind? How do you look at it in a broader way, unlike in a STEM subject where you are looking at it in a very specialist format? Being an HR person, one of the conversations I keep having in my organization is that, we understand science and we understand STEM subjects, we are not that good at understanding what liberal arts is. And we always talk about let's be factual, let's be data driven, little realizing that even these other programs are very factual and data driven. And I'll talk from my side. You know, I'm an HR person. I always say that behavior is a data. When somebody behaves well, that is data. When somebody behaves in a different way, that is data. And it is very important for us to be able to recognize patterns and data when it comes at us. We are very comfortable to look at financial numbers or a technologist's view of the world because that's hard data. But the minute you start looking at it from a completely different lens of liberal arts or behavioral sciences, then you are a little bit stumped because this is not what you're used to. But this is data, and we have to train ourselves to pick up these trends that are happening. And you know, how do you then bring that into the workplace to have a much more sound decision making that happens? Why is it that people are so much more comfortable rattling numbers than being able to confront a colleague on behavioral issues? Something very simple. We always say you didn't meet your sales numbers and I'm mad at you and I want to, I don't want you in my team, or I want to improve your performance. How comfortable are you to say you behave badly with people? You are very rude. And the way you behave, nobody wants to work with you. I can't promote you because nobody wishes to work with you as a leader. How many of our people are actually comfortable to have that conversation? Most people feel that's very soft. But my point of view is that's not soft. That's hard data. You have to be comfortable to deal with this. And when I talk of a liberal education, it actually enables you to open your mind and to recognize all these other inputs as well that come in, which today we don't recognize. And therefore, you sort of silo your brain to say, I'm only going to look for data. I want to be data driven in my decision. And my point is, yes, you must be data driven in your decision, but be holistic in the data that you're collecting. And all of this is also data.
Very valid point that, how do you, look at decisions where, you integrate, which comes out of data, which is the way data is perceived versus data which is, softer, which is behavioral and not probably captured the way the sales numbers are captured. I think very valid point which has been made, and a very important point. And, coming to numbers, and I found there is a question, Mahesh, and you will be able to answer that question very well, that the whole issue of obsession with salaries, positions, and do you think that the way, ROI of MBA degree is measured will continue to hold good going forward?
So there are two opinions to it, Atish. At a very young age, every child would start looking at ROI because he's been told to look at ROI. We always want our children to be ahead of the queue, even if it means that you bypass the queue and stand ahead. Right? It's always a rat race that we're dealing with. While I'm coming to this, Atish, I'll add one more thing to what Professor Parshu earlier said. See, we've always debated whether management is an art or a science, right? And the debate has never ended. And somewhere along the line, in terms of our work culture, science seems to have won the thing in a certain sense, right? The art part of it got left out. And every time we're dealing with management education as a science, that we've ignored culture and society completely in the scheme of things. So for me personally, I think this is a debate that has to be won by saying that management is both an art and a science in different forms. When you deal with certain things, it is an art. When you deal with certain other things, it's a science. Obviously, when you deal with technology, it can't be an art. And when you deal with something else, which is philosophy or history or literature, it cannot be a science, right? But both have to coexist. And for me, that is the essence of this entire conversation. When we say liberal arts, it must move towards liberal curriculum. I think we are essentially saying that management is both an art and a science. And while we're teaching students about science, we should also deal with culture and philosophy and history and literature and society, and to that extent, impact. And that is very important. And what was the question, Atish? I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
No, the question was,
ROI,
will the
ROI.
conventional measure of ROI hold good
Yeah.
going forward? Because it is always ROI is about salaries.
Which is right. At the first 5 years of their life, the student, it is a very good that you should not look at your salaries. You must look at the kind of gain that you will have over your lifetime. He's not looking at that. So initially, all of us worked on ROI, and now we are comfortable enough to say that, listen, what I've learned had a long-term bearing on me. So it's a different way of measuring ROI. But it is very difficult for institutions to go and tell the children that ROI is not just salaries. Having said that, when I talk to my employees, I say this pretty openly. People don't work only for money. It is us employers who cannot retain an employee, say that this guy has gone out because he's got a better offer somewhere. It is not always the case. When you look around, you'll actually see a lot of people who are working with you, who deserve more but are getting lesser, who get better offers outside but choose to stay back. So if money is the single biggest determinant, people will go. Having said that, there will be some people for whom money is very important because of the family conditions, and we need to accept that. So for me as an employer, it's like today, if I were to call an employee and say, listen, I'm going to pay you $100 million every year, all you need to do is to present yourself every single day morning, I'll give you 1,000 lashes. Would you work with me? Because if money is the determinant, that's what it is. The thing is that people don't work for money alone. Having said that, in the first 2-3 years, if you're dealing with a student who's just graduated and gotten onto an MBA, he will look at an ROI, and to that extent, the B school should not give up the battle of ensuring that the cost is in control. You simply cannot say that, MBA has a long-term lifetime value, so it has to be appropriated or apportioned over a period over the life of the student. So to that extent, the cost can go anywhere. That I don't believe in, because one of the things that I hold all MBAs and all B school institutions, especially to task, is that while they were working on improving the quality of education, they gave up the battle on affordability of education, and that should not be lost, because that will be this entire thing of societal impact is hurt when we say that I'm going to produce such good people that it costs more, in which case you are actually creating a ghetto. And in a ghetto, you actually have a set of people who pay X amount of money to have a Y amount of outcome, and that's what you'll get. If you have a diversity, which is a poor student and a rich student, and how you fund them need blind is something we need to work on. So for me, yes, ROI is important. It cannot be given up at the initial stage. So to that extent, the onus is on the student as well as on the institution to ensure that the ROI measure is reasonably maintained.
Okay, important point made. Professor Parsu, I would like to ask this whole issue of the narrative, where whenever people get into an MBA program, they talk about the starting packages.
Yeah.
Is there a requirement or is there a need to change the narrative, in terms of just not the starting package, but the kind of role or the impact that you can make on the society as a graduate?
Absolutely. I think I really like the points that Mahesh made. To add another wrinkle to it, and also related to your question, Atish, I would say that both the numerator and the denominator of the ROI equation needs to be re-examined, not only from the student's perspective, but also from the hiring institutions' perspectives, particularly the numerator, in terms of what are the outcomes. So from that perspective, Atish, to go to your specific question, I would say that most students today, the younger students I see, I totally agree with Mahesh. They are not in there for the money. I mean, there's some minimum requirements, family commitments, and so forth, where money is important. But beyond that, they are looking for example, work-life balance. They are looking for companies that are ethical. They're looking for things that companies that would do good to society. Doing well by doing good. So it's kind of the modern management mantra. So all of those will go into the numerator of the equation of ROI. And then in the denominator, of course, it's the time and the effort, how much money, fees that the students pay, from a student's perspective. But it's not just that. There's also sacrifices they have to make beyond just paying the fees. So that goes into the equation too. So it's not as easy to compute ROI in the modern era as it used to be once. You say, okay, this is the fees and this is my monetary return over a lifetime. But I think that concept is probably no longer tenable. And students are looking for things beyond money. Now with the pandemic and so forth, the working from home, for example, I think under whatever the new normal is, I think more companies are going to re-examine about work-life balance issues. And whenever this thing is over in a year or 2 years, however long this is going to take, I think things are going to drastically change. And this is where, again, I feel, people that are going to manage these, post-COVID management era would be much better off if they have a broader way of looking at things rather than, looking at things linearly or structurally. If they can kind of connect the dots out of the box and come up with solutions, I think, which also creates a need for more entrepreneurial education. People that can, because technologies can change, careers can change, because one of the important things that is happening in the environment is longevity is increasing, right? So it's not like, most, Mahesh, you can jump in here too. We used to think of, okay, I have an MBA, I'm working for AstraZeneca, it's a great company and that's my career. I think that is going to change. There's going to be a lot more mobility. There probably will be like 3 or 4 careers within a lifespan. And so the ability to continue to learn is going to be very, very important. So to the extent that liberal professional university or institution can lay the foundation to facilitate that kind of long-term thinking in terms of acquiring knowledge, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to acquire knowledge during my 2-year program in an MBA institution, and then I'm going to leverage that to increase my ROI. So that's going to change. So, yeah.
Very two important points made. Multiple careers with a in a lifespan, which is, we are talking about 100-year life expectancy today. And there is a very interesting question, and I think Smita mentioned that when she said that she studied subjects like political science or sociology when she was doing her graduation science, that is genetics. Now question is, what kind of impact does the liberal curriculum has in one's career over an extended period of time? And second question related to that is, what are the kind of courses or interventions that needs to be introduced in order to make that happen? Smita.
Thank you so much, Atish. One of the things that I'm quite passionate about is the fact that, when you are actually training students in an MBA school or in any college, really, it's really important to guide them to the right values. And the reason I say that is, while on one hand we all talk about why is the starting salary of an MBA such a big deal, that it comes into the Times of India front page, that so and so college gives these are the kinds of numbers their students have got, etc. I think we've all got into this whole piece from the wrong end. And we have all of us to blame as well. It is really not just the student. It is what we have talked about. And we have tried to tell them, oh, it's really valuable. Your starting salary is 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, whatever that might be, without realizing that there is a bigger value that needs to get articulated. And one of the things that a lot of organizations have realized is about purpose, is about value. And honestly, I have actually seen this work. When you connect to the purpose that you hold dear to yourself, and you are doing something which links to that purpose, that really improves your delivery, your what you think about, how you do it, how you approach your work, and excellence. Honestly, it seems like it's an area that people don't really what shall I say, articulate strongly enough. But if you did try that, it really does work. Earlier Mahesh was talking about, people will work for money or not, and that equation, I totally agree. People work for much more than money, and over time, and especially with shall I say, the students who are coming through colleges now, the reason that they take on an organization are very different from the reasons where perhaps we took on an organization. They genuinely look for things like, what is your purpose? What is it that you really do? What kind of difference do you make? And they want to be associated with some of those greater good. And an organization which can actually articulate that and help employees to, explore that. I think that's really, really important. And that's why I say, one of the things as teachers is about mentoring people. It is not always in the class, but it is much broader. Whether you mentor them in your institute, or you bring in industry people to mentor them, it's really important, because you're shaping thoughts. And it's really important because that's when you start telling them about, why, when you are identifying organizations to come to your college, on what basis do you give them, day 1, day 2, day 3 status? Most of the time it is based upon the number of vacancies and your package. What about looking at it from a different angle? Which are those jobs that would really excite a person? In fact, I have met people who will come and tell me, oh, that was a day 1 company, it was prestigious, I applied for it, I got it, but that's really not what I wanted. And I'm thinking, there was no mentoring available to this young person who probably went and applied to an organization that everybody else thought was day 1, and it wasn't where his heart was. And and this is so sad, because I think while we teach them everything, values and purpose can be shaped through mentoring, through coaching, through integration of the curriculum with broader aspects in society, where you actually help them to open their mind and look and value those other things.
Fantastic points made, that values and purpose can be shaped, and that it can, even the young minds can be shaped through mentoring and coaching. Institutions are doing that, particularly at IFI. This is happening, where mentoring and purposing through the process of mentoring is a very important initiative. I just wanted to share this because you mentioned this. But the point is that when we are talking about a liberal curriculum, and there is a question, and I would like this question to be answered by you, Smita. What are the kind of courses which can be integrated in the curriculum? You talked about interventions like mentoring, purposing, giving them exposure to the social initiatives that you talked about, those interventions. But here is a specific question regarding courses. Would you like to take that, the kind of courses that you would like to the schools to introduce?
Okay, so here's what I would do, Atish. I'll tell you what I'm looking for, and then you can probably turn them into a course. Okay. I'm looking for people who have learning agility, who can think out of the box and are unconstrained in their thoughts. People who have creativity, because creativity is required for problem solving. I'm looking for people who are entrepreneurial and people who are innovative, or who are able to drive innovation. Does that help?
Fantastic.
Now, how you turn that into a program, you are the expert. I'm not. I'm explaining to you what I need as the capabilities when I look for a person. Would that help?
Fantastic. I would throw that question back to Professor Parsu. With his experience, he should be able to throw some light on that.
Well, yeah. In fact, I had a list of things. I had like a lot of C's. Creativity, curiosity, courage,
Yes.
connecting the dots ability, continuous
Yes.
learning, concern for society and environment. So that's
Yes.
half a dozen of C's for you. So how do we convert these into courses? I don't think these can be converted into traditional courses, either on the liberal side or on the professional side. But what can happen is this individual projects are much more amenable, that can be custom fit to the needs and the aspirations of students, would be one way to kind of implement this idea in a formal 2-year program type of course. For example, I know at IFIM and Vijayabhumi University, our redesigned curriculum focuses a lot of credits, almost like 50% of the credits on learning through doing type of activities. Where you have internships and projects that students work on, and also faculty members are presumably actively involved in those things. That's where the mentoring can come in as well, individual coaching, one-on-one mentoring, as opposed to traditional one-to-many classroom type of teaching alone. So I think it's a blend. It's a blend of learning through doing, arriving at solutions to complex problems through actually learning how to attack those problems with help from faculty. And that's where the faculty development also comes in my view. I don't think you can just design a curriculum like this and hope that it works. You need to also have faculty that can also think out of the box, faculty that are also curious, faculty that are also have the ability to step out of their comfort zones. And that's why I think younger institutions that are not well established will have an easier time, to go back to a point that I made earlier, in terms of faculty nurturing and faculty molding. So I think institutions that really want to sort of be at the forefront of this liberal MBA program, or rediscovering the MBA program approach, the younger institutions, I think will have are more better primed, so to speak, to excel in this area.
Thank you for fantastic. Coming back to those C's, Maheshwar, now that we are, we have looked at all these issues, okay, and the fact that Smita mentioned what they are looking at, like learning agility, the whole issue of unconstrained thinking, creativity, entrepreneurial thinking, innovation, etc. Okay, how do you see this happening in the Indian context, and how do you see the future shaping? Because you closely follow the MBA education. Your closing remarks on this.
So I personally think that anything that for which a curriculum is written or a book exists, it will happen. So I don't see any problem in institutions, even standalone institutions, adapting to this. I would add a couple of more things to it, which is societal impact and those kind of things. Because I think increasingly we'll fail not because we are not efficient, but we'll fail because we did not understand the other part of the world, the other people that we need to understand. So for me, every institution, every B school will successfully, see through this change that is needed in terms of dealing with the multiple issues that exist, for which there's a curriculum, because that is easy. But how do you ensure that the student also thinks beyond the curriculum and starts maneuvering himself into being a better human being, being a person that is more valuable than how much he earns? One is P&L and one is and balance sheet and those kind of things. But there are a lot more things beyond P&L and balance sheet, which is where I think the question that B schools must ask themselves is, and the typical thing that I learned when I was a kid was that survival of the fittest, maximizing profits. These are terms that should be outdated. They must be in the dustbin as of yesterday, right? So the question that B schools must answer is: do we create better managers or do we create better change agents? And change agents can be viable, sustainable, and profitable. Please understand that. I'm not asking you to create activists. I'm asking you to create people who are good managers, better managers, who understand everything around them. And that is where I think liberal arts education will play a pivotal role. Like I can tell you about myself, my value for money, today, thank God that, I have a decent amount of, I'm pretty successful. But my value of money is when I saw a student I studied in a government college in a government hostel, is when I realized that students stay back in the hostel when the holidays are only 7 days, because they can't afford to go back and come back within 7 days. It doesn't give them an ROI, right? So the value of money for those people is what I would value my money at this point in time. That I say the value, you can talk about that in theory, but when I see people valuing money much more than what I have, when I can spend 1,000 rupees on a Swiggy and this person says 1,000 rupees is my life for a full month, then that is value for money. So for me, I think B schools must endeavor to create students who are not managers but change agents, and that requires a lot more of liberal arts than what we currently have.
Fantastic point, Smita. The point very well taken, that liberal arts will play a pivotal role. And Mahesh talked about going beyond P&L and the balance sheet, and beyond just looking at maximization of profit. Your take and the closing remarks on how the liberal arts curriculum can play a role in that, if at all.
No, I think it's really, really good. And I so resonate with what Mahesh is talking about. The fact that you have to go beyond. And I totally believe that's true. And if you are talking about unconstrained thinking, and if you're talking about the ability to actually create change and play that role, then you need a completely different kind of person, right? And then completely different kind of a program that would help, our younger people, and not just look at it from a perspective of a STEM subject or from the perspective of a traditional MBA program. I think, one of the things which is really, really important is that at the end of the day, whatever program you put together, you can only see into the future for maybe a few years. But when they leave your college, they leave with a program, a degree, or some capabilities that they're going to use for the rest of their life. So it's really important to broaden the scope then and bring in those kinds of learnability, learning agility, change management, reading trends in the environment, seemingly connecting dots, all of that. These are life skills. It's not just a program. And I think that would be the biggest service we can do to our students, to give them these types of capabilities that irrespective of whatever change happens in the environment, they can dip into their toolbox and find something to take them.
Fantastic, Smita. The whole issue of life skills, reading the trends, bringing about the change. Sarah, how do you see that happening? Your, closing remarks on that.
Yeah, I think I've already sort of alluded to, what I would say in my closing remarks. I think, just to reiterate, to develop those kinds of individuals that are lifelong learners, that can be creative and think out of the box and so forth. You need flexibility within institutions to create the types of environments, both for the students and for the faculty, to kind of co-create these. And then these, the program architecture might be there, but the content of the program itself needs to evolve as conditions change externally. And I think, so there again, we need to have, agile faculty in addition to agile students, and this co-creation of knowledge for, lifelong survival, so to speak, and thriving in the outside world is something that I think the younger institutions might be much more adept at doing. So
Adish, I'll just add to one thing that Professor Parasu said, because it's important from my perspective. He talked of flexibility of institutions.
Right.
And the flexibility of institutions would come when good institutions can create a 15-20% need blind student intake. Not because we want to do a favor to the student, but we want to do a favor to the other 80-90% students within the class who will understand and learn from that diversity. So for me, he hit the thing right there, that the flexibility of an institution to create a class of all kinds of people will ensure that your liberal arts program starts with the class itself, and that is what you must go towards.
Excellent point.
I think excellent point. Thank you so much, Mahesh. I must add one thing. We at Vijay Bhumi have instituted a principal scholarship. The principal of a school can actually give a scholarship to someone who is deserving, and based on the criteria that may not be just academic. And that, I think, is a point which is very well taken from Mahesh. Fantastic, to have you and to have your points. Thank you, sir, for joining from Miami. Mita, thank you so much for your insights and inputs. Thank you so much. Thanks, audience, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.